hold that thought till we're done. And that's Dr. Ravi, and over here is Alex and Alex, two Alexes. I can't go anywhere without Alexes. And you will see there will be more Alexes joining today on live stream, and you'll see them on the screen. Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad you're here because entrepreneurship or starting something and taking you to the finish line has been a passion of mine for a long time. I'll talk a little bit about myself, even though I hate doing that. If you go on YouTube, you'll find several speeches I've made, but none of them are about me. I don't do that. My life. So first, let's just look at quickly the course outline. 11 lectures. We will end the actual competitive part just before Thanksgiving, where you will all present again. Today, you'll all be presenting 7-minute. How much have you been told to present? 7-minute pitches or 10-minute pitches? 7-minute pitches today. And I will also, we'll get to what we're going to do. But then on the 22nd of November, you will then present based on what you've learned, based on redoing, hopefully tearing your presentation down into the ruins and rebuilding it like a phoenix, so that it's compelling, there's storytelling aspect to it, and there's also real meat where the investor is ready to invest. So what we need to really get to is, are you investable? Is really the end goal. I mean, even though the course is titled From Idea to Impact, which is all of you are working on PhDs, which is really an idea. To get a PhD, it has to be fairly original. It can't be plagiarizing from someone else. So what you need to do is take this idea and make it into something that's impactful, we hope. Not just so that it's, binder on some shelf and you get a raise because you are working for Shell or BP or one of those companies. And then we'll end with a presentation from the Vice Chancellor of the University of California, Santa Cruz on soft skills, which I think is very important. Like when the associate professor spoke, he projected so well. That's part of soft skills. And telling the odd, humorous line is part of soft skills. Smiling when you need to, not using verbal viruses like and which is very aggravating for people who are listening. However, they're very useful for you when you're not well prepared and you're not aware of these viruses that infect your speech. So all of that will be on the 11th course. Any questions? Oh, by the way, please, just don't sit there silently. If you've got any questions, any issues, anything you want to get clarification on, interrupt me, please. Fair?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll look at today's lecture as essentially telling you what the course outline is, which I think I've tried to do. Talk a little bit about what is entrepreneurship, what is innovation. Innovation is a very misunderstood word. Listen to your pitches, then get an example of what you can be when we look at a company called Libertech from Germany, speaking in their second or third language, not in their mother tongue, winning the Rice Business Plan competition with ease, brilliantly. And then we'll look at some assignments. Are you all up to doing a little homework every lesson? Not a lot. I mean, it'll be a lot more work for me because I've got to read them all. But if you're up to it, we'll set up assignments. Now, of course, this course is voluntary, so if you don't turn it in, it doesn't ruin your grade because you're not getting one. But that will be of interest to me anyway, to see how you are progressing. Any questions? So the learning objectives of these 11 courses, 11 lectures is, first of all, understand the basic elements of entrepreneurship, to understand where's the opportunity. Are you an idea looking for a problem to solve, or are you really fixing the pain point of some segment of society or economy or technology or any kind of, yes, doctor?
Yes, so is it always necessary to figure out the problem if you have?
In most cases, yes.
If there is no pain point, but there is significant improvement to be had, would that also
For sure. Well, that is a pain point. If you have to improve, that means you're not good.
But everything is working okay, everyone is happy, so there is no pain.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's a famous line, but sometimes it can get better. So you're right. But also, the whole concept of entrepreneurship is having the courage to start something, knowing that you have the courage to do something wrong in the pursuit of something spectacularly right. Did you get that long sentence I just did? Knowing that you might do something wrong in the pursuit of something that may end up spectacularly right. I mean, my favorite example is the concept that Arthur C. Clarke, the famous science fiction writer, his paper for Cambridge when he graduated in the 40s, just after World War II, was on satellites. Nobody had ever thought of it then. That wasn't a pain point for anyone. He turned into a science fiction writer because no one believed it could happen, and he wrote great books. But those concepts identified that in the end, someone did something spectacularly right, when at the outset it looked wrong. So part and parcel of the courage to act is also the courage to do something wrong, when you really believe that it could be something spectacular. So that kind of addresses your point, Doc.
Well said.
Pardon?
Well said.
Okay. You create a sentence on the fly, and it turned out all right. So opportunity recognition, and how you go about recognizing the opportunity, interviewing your prospective customers, interviewing your prospective teammates, all of that opportunity recognition, which is something that most PhD students are not very good at, because you're very good at what you do, deep expertise. Looking at what is the startup life cycle of any company, you have an idea, how do you take it to exit, IPO, huge profitability, listed on NASDAQ, whatever. We'll look at how do you do it in a lean way so that you don't waste your investors' money and you don't end up bankrupting the company. So we're going to examine the concept of a lean startup. And then we're going to go all the way. There's one slide missing here. Anyway, people wanted me to talk about myself, but I'd rather you just Google me. I don't like talking about myself. Slides are in reverse order. This one should be before the next previous one. This is the rest of the course. Develop skills in marketing. We talked about lean startup, develop skills in marketing, strategic planning. Venture, IP protection, the legal side of setting up a company, how a legal strategy can be a competitive strategy. Now you're all going, huh? How can a bunch of lawyers be a competitive strategy? But they can, and we'll talk about that. We'll examine that in, I think, lecture number 7. Putting together a good pitch, being able to tell a story, being able to convince somebody to write you a check, even though it's not their idea. And then how do you exit? How do you get money back to your investors? How do you then make it an impactful project? And then the final part, as I talked about, is soft skills, communication skills. Like I said, I don't like talking about myself, but Dr. Radha and Dr. Ravi insisted. So here goes real quick, just so that you get an idea of maybe I have a little bit of experience in some of these things. However, came to this country 55 years ago. After doing my first master's, I did 18 years in corporate America. When I turned 40, I was like a caged animal. So I quit and I went and started my own business. We were lucky. It became successful. IPO'd on NASDAQ. I got a chance to ring the opening bell, which was quite an honor. Then I sold the company, retired, came to Houston to work for Enron as president of their North American operations for 1 year, long before they crashed. And anyone who wants Enron stories, you can free to ask them. Then I made 5 movies. I also am very much involved in an organization called TIE, as well as the Goose Capital Group, where I'm a board director, and I'm an angel investor. We invest in a lot of startups, this company being one, and hopefully taking them to exit. And then I also want to share with you at the end of this session today, lessons that I've learned, because I went to the school of hard knocks. You guys are going to the school where you can learn from other people's mistakes. So I see my role over these next 11 lectures is to also impart to you the mistakes I made so that you don't make them. Fair? Okay, quick show of hands. Who here considers himself an entrepreneur? Okay. Who considers himself an intrapreneur? That you will like to get your degree and then go work for a big company, but maybe do something creative inside of the. Okay, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 intrapreneurs. There's going to be a section on lecture 6 or 7 where I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship, how to handle the dynamics, the politics, the bureaucracy of large, glacial speed companies. In fact, there's a joke I used to tell when I was at Enron about the utilities, about how slow they were. It's about this utility executive was going to testify in front of Congress. He did such a bad job, he knew he was going to get fired. So he decides to commit suicide. So he runs out into the street and throws himself in front of a moving glacier. Just a little thing about how large bureaucracies tend to move around. But entrepreneurship within a bureaucracy. Okay, another show of hands. Who knows how to spell entrepreneur? It's a word that has come into our lexicon recently. It did exist when I first started. It was like you're starting your own company, of course, this entrepreneur stuff. It actually originates from the French word called entreprendre, which means to attempt, to undertake. And it has become a definition for people who will start a company and take substantial risk. So, to be an entrepreneur, you need what I call the entrepreneurial gene. And it's really not a gene, because I think it is more a virus. It randomly infects people, irrespective of gender, ethnicity, demographics, status, class, wealth, whatever. And really, it is something that you don't inherit. Like, look at my own family, my 2 brothers, very risk averse. One's a doctor, one's a PhD in AI. My dad was a military man, general in the army. So, and here I am, I have 2 radar detectors in my car just so that I don't get caught when I'm speeding. So the point is that why isn't then every place you look equally entrepreneurial? Why is Israel more entrepreneurial than, let's say, Finland? And that is because before I get to that, to be an entrepreneur, you've got to have this irresistible urge to create and without the fear of failure. We talk about here in the US fail fast. I'm not so sure I like that very much, because it's better if you just don't fail. But you have to be prepared to fail. You have to be prepared to take the risk. But why is, like I said, okay, let me ask you a question. What is the most entrepreneur-friendly country on earth that encourages entrepreneurship? We rank 7.
Oh.
Yeah. Singapore. Oh, bingo. Go to the top of it. Well, you're already professor. But it is not the most entrepreneurial country on earth. The reason it's an entrepreneur-friendly country is because it has all of the institutions, the soil and the fertilizer, as they call it, where the tree of entrepreneurship can flourish. Access to good infrastructure, ease of starting a company, government grants, all of what it takes for a company to start, exist, and flourish. Singapore provides. But it's not the most entrepreneurial country on earth. Why? If you're a failure, cultural, the family says, hey, you mean you couldn't get a job, so you're going to go start a company? And that's the shame of failure. Singapore, Finland, these are the countries that are really high on that scale when you look at UN statistics. statistics. And regulations and corruptions are part of those institutions that we talk about. And you look at India and China. China is the greatest example of wealth creation in the history of mankind since 1979. They've gone to now almost a $20 trillion economy in the space of 4 years. And that's because they started deregulating. Now, they've done it in a different way than, let's say, we do here in this country. But India is another example from 1992. It was almost a bankrupt nation. Then the prime minister, a really solid last name. What do you think it was?
Rao.
Rao. Yeah, Prime Minister Rao liberated the economy. They get to talk.
Was he your uncle?
No. I wish. I wish. So one fundamental rule is entrepreneurs innovate. An entrepreneur is always an innovator. And an innovator may not always be an entrepreneur. For instance, let me give you an example. One of the products we use all the time in our life is sticky note. The yellow sticky note. It was created by a guy in 3M.
Yeah.
Worked 40 years for 3M. Probably retired with a gold watch, and that's all he got. And 3M has made billions on his invention. So he was an innovator, but he was not an entrepreneur. But to be an entrepreneur, you have to innovate in some form or fashion. Even plagiarizing somebody else's idea is still an innovation. But innovation, I believe, is a very misunderstood word. Who do you think, amongst you, who thinks they know they can define what innovation is? Well, nobody wants to embarrass themselves by telling them you're wrong, but nobody's wrong. I mean, everybody has their own definition. So let's talk about what is innovation. So, a lot of the pundits say it's some vague, aspirational definition of ideas that create value, and it comes from the Latin word that says, inter new, innovatus. However, all of these experts would even have you believe, how many of you know the Rubik's Cube? Very few of them. Is it an innovation? Did it create a lot of value? Maybe. But true innovation are these guys. These are the true innovators. People like Thomas Edison, who had 1,300 patents and invented all kinds of things. Alexander Fleming, who created penicillin that saves lives. Jonas Salk.
Sorry, is there a difference between innovation and invention?
I'm coming to it. Please don't get ahead of the class.
These are inventors.
Oh no, they innovate. For instance, I would argue Steve Jobs. He didn't invent anything. He did invent it. He innovated it. He took concepts that others did and created. We'll get to that. So defining innovation. It is a process by which an idea or an invention is transformed or mutated into products and services that people require and people will pay for. You could even call, Mozart an innovator. Great innovator with music. And that's what he did. He took existing ideas. Bach invented the minor key. Mozart used it in his music. So, and let's go back to, it's time for a story, and I don't mean Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf. Little story, just to break up the rules. So here is this very wealthy Texas cattleman, very successful, has his private jet, doing very well, but he's never seen a bullfight. The bullfights have now been made illegal in most of the world except Spain. So he figures, I'm going to go to Spain. By the way, just be patient. There's some reason for this little story. And he books himself a ringside seat at the greatest bull ring in the world, which is Seville. Flies over to Seville, Spain, watches the bull fight. It's magnificent. The bull's a great bull. The matador's in fine form. The buller's the coup de grace. The crowd applauds, and when the matador does well, the ears go to the matador, the ears of the bull. The guy's really happy. His dream is fulfilled. He goes to dinner at a swanky restaurant right next to the bull ring. And he's having dinner when right next to him at the table he sees this big steaming hot plate come up with two round things on it. And being a cattleman, he thinks he knows what it is. He calls the waiter over and he says, "Hey, is that what I think it is? I'm a cattleman. We call them Texas oysters where I come from." "Si, senor. They're the cojones of the toro that was in the bull ring. The matador, he gets the ears and we get the cojones for the specialty of the house." Now this guy is really fascinated. He says, "Can I come tomorrow?" "Sorry, senor, we're booked for 1 year." He's about to sign out his bill when the waiter comes in. Senor, tomorrow's customer canceled. You can have his table. Sit on back. He has his own private jet. He comes to dinner all excited. The plate comes. And it doesn't look the same. It's a little different. He has his meal. And he calls the waiter over and he says, hey, yesterday the meal looked really magnificent. Today, what happened? Sorry, senor, sometimes the bull wins. People laugh at the end of a joke, not at the start. Why? Because it only makes sense in hindsight. There's no context at the start of the joke. When I started telling you about the cattleman, you had no context, right? Where was the funny line coming from? I hope it was funny, by the way. Till we hear the proverbial punchline, then our mind works backwards. And we make sense of it all, and we laugh. Just like that is innovation. Innovation is a very abstract concept. It is the ability to see value in hindsight. That's the crucial skill for an innovator. Did that all make sense finally, all together? And was the joke funny? I hope. So innovation is not an invention, but it could be. Innovation is not an idea alone, a brilliant spark, or an epiphany, but it could be. It's not always unpredictable and random, but it could be. And it's not a spin on an existing product, but it could be. Just like Steve Jobs' creation of the iPhone, which came from the iPod, which came from Napster. It was original idea is Napster. Apple created the iPod, and then from the iPod came the iPhone, which is probably one of the great innovations of our generation. Again, not his invention, not an original idea, but a great innovation. The ability to see value in hindsight is innovation. And so that's what a challenge for all of you PhDs is do you look at your idea that you're working on as simply a way to get your PhD, or is there going to be some value to some people somewhere with some product, service, or goods that you're going to create as a result of your academic work? One cautionary, this is one of my favorite statements. Bill Gates said this many, many, many years ago, is we always overestimate the change that will occur from something new in 2 years. And we always underestimate the change that it will cause in 10 years. iPhone being a classic example. It has changed the world. But it took 20 years, or 10 years at least, for it to really have that impact. In the first 2 years, it really didn't. It was a toy. It was something, for status. But today, it's fundamentally the poorest person in India or China has a smartphone, because without it, he can't sell whatever the product he has that he's selling on the street. And 20 years ago, when the first iPhone came out, it was very expensive and a status symbol. Does that all make sense to you all? Any questions, anyone, please? Speak up. Just don't let the dot man monopolize the questions.
I got one for you.
Please, throw it.
So, will this change in the next 2 years?
Will what change?
Because we know the Moore's law and other things, it's getting faster and faster.
Mm-hmm.
So this 2 and 10 might become 2 months and then like 2 years or something.
Could be, but I still think it's 2 years and 10 years. I think Bill Gates is still spot on in most things. Now with AI coming at us like a fire hose, we're drinking from the end of a fire hose. Who knows? But it's still 2 years and 10 years for stuff to really take impact.
Actually, what you're saying is exactly what you're saying. We think in the next 2 years a lot of things will change, but it will not.
No, what I'm trying to say is in the thing that is working today, then there will be 5 things in the next 10 years that might be upgraded. So between 2 and 10 there will be more changes that we can't predict 10 years. It's too
but we're not being mathematicians when we say 10 years. We're being philosophers when we say 10 years.
There's one thing to innovate, there's one thing to adopt.
Yes.
The masses are not quick to adopt change. And so that's the long tail of innovation, where it generally takes even the most innovative things like the iPhone, it generally still takes, even AI, like people are starting to use it, but are we really capturing the value that we will have in 10 years out of
Maturity,
AI right
yes.
now, over 2 years.
Maturity.
Yeah, for mass adoption, right? You know.
Sorry. I thought I put mine on silent. That's another tip for any company. Put your phone on silent. Okay. I thought I had, but I hadn't activated it. And then I disconnected us. Yeah, and there's a flywheel to human acceptance of ideas, products, services. I mean, we're getting quicker and quicker, but don't forget, for this iPhone to become so ubiquitous, there are 8 billion smartphones on Earth today. They have to penetrate the furthest villages of Mongolia and Ghana and Argentina and China and India. So it takes a while, and it takes volume, acceptance, volume, prices coming down, more acceptance, prices coming down, more acceptance, till it becomes ubiquitous. Yes?
So I kind of like what Amir was saying, in terms of the masses accepting it and all of us being entrepreneurs wanting to change the industry standards of whichever industry we're in. How do we kind of fit into that timeline, and like what are the steps that we need to take to ensure that we are the change that occurs in that 10-year span?
Well, we'll talk about that as we go, but it's not important for you to worry about that here. These are more like macroeconomic and macro societal impacts that, again, we see the value in hindsight. What your challenge as innovators, inventors, PhDs, researchers, deep domain expertise, your challenge is to make sure that when you get it right, once somebody needs it, it isn't a problem looking for an idea to solve. I mean, an idea looking for a problem to solve, I beg your pardon. And just go at it. Stay focused. Like I said, the courage to do something wrong in the pursuit of something spectacularly right. And you never know. For me, the best example of that, let's go back to our hometown of Houston. When was it founded? Mid-19th century? Right after San Houston got rid of Santa Ana. By whom? Who founded Houston? Not San Houston. The Allen brothers. Augustus and John Allen. You've got the Allen Center all over town. And why did they do it? 6,600 acres of swampland was the original piece of Houston that they owned. They had the vision. They had, okay, the Buffalo Bayou is a great interconnecting little pathway for transporting cotton. So let's build a city here on swampland. And look what they did. They had the dream. At that time, the two greatest ports were New Orleans and Galveston. Galveston was the richest city in the country at the time. Now 40% of the country's oil comes through here. We have the world's greatest medical center, and we control the launch of any spaceship that goes up in Earth, into the sky. Augustus and John Allen had the courage to do something wrong, which is build a city on swampland, in the pursuit of something spectacular, like this city. So I'm saying that you don't worry about it. I mean, Augustus and John Allen never lived to see Houston become the city it was. That sort of answer your question? Yeah. So starting a company. How many of you intend to start a company, by the way? Okay, a pretty good percentage. It's exciting stuff, right? But it's not always fun and games. Technology success is not a linear, it's a non-linear process. It's not linear. You've got great ups, great downs, great expectations. It's fits and starts. 9 out of 10 companies fail. That's the sad truth. 9 out of 10 startups fail. Everybody thinks, I want to be the next Zappos. So I'm going to start this e-commerce platform because I can do what Zappos did. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Zappos. They sold shoes online. Hundreds of companies have tried to do the same thing. Everybody wants to be the next Airbnb. There's only one. And they've survived everyone who's tried. Verbo is perhaps one competitor. So you cannot always say, hey, this is going to be a smooth upward trajectory and I'm going to be successful. Because if you start off with that, then you're in for some rough times. Yeah, what I call, the cycle. You've got new technologies to trigger, all of a sudden creating inflated expectations, then disillusionment when reality sets in, and then you work hard, and 1 out of 10 break through this cycle and become successful. So be ready for that. I don't mean to make you depressed, but if you fail, pick yourself up and go at it again. But with the domain expertise you all have, you have a better chance. You have a chance to be in that 1 out of 10 rather than the 9 out of 10. And innovation. So if you're innovation, you can be entrepreneur. Because that is the fuel for entrepreneurship, is innovation. Without that, you cannot have an entrepreneurial venture. Entrepreneurs start businesses, they hire people, they create jobs, but ideas are not always enough. Just having an idea isn't enough to be able to build a company, correct? What do you think we need when we have an idea and we want to build a company? We need money. Now, where do they all come from? They come from the 3 F's. I call them friends, family, and fools. That's typically how you start. But then once you start to build, you can start out by taking your salary, getting a loan, credit card, maxing out your credit cards, borrowing money, getting some government grants like their company got. In Germany, of course, there's a lot of government grants. Singapore, the example we took about, they're very good with government grants. But here's the funding cycle, the valley of death. While you're trying to come up with your company, 9 out of 10 will fail. And where do all of the money sources come? Well, at the outset, of course, it's founders and the 3 F's, parents, family, and fools. As you start to validate your product, you will get angels coming in, such as Boost Capital, such as TIE, such as other locations. But the whole concept of venture capital, which was about helping venture, is less. They want to see validation in your business model. They want to see real path of success. They are de-risked. So what the venture capital community was back in the 50s and 60s, which built Silicon Valley, the greatest business experiment in this country, or in the world, I would say, that venture spirit is somewhat gone and is being backfilled by angel investors. And then, of course, once you're successful, everybody wants to give you money. So that's not your worry. Your worry is to take your idea and go through the valley of death and come out of it. That make sense to you all? How many of you are aware of the fact that it's such a low percentage? Okay. So everybody's got a dose of reality. What happened? Did I do something? All right. So far, everything's made sense to you, or any questions before we go to lessons learned, and then we'll go to pitches? Any questions? Doctor?
No, I think it's really enlightening to hear some of these concepts and see how we can apply them, and hearing from a respected individual like yourself.
Okay, so we're now going to dive into the lessons and learn along the way. And the way I call it is that over my entrepreneurial career, that's after I burst out of the cage, is that I have a tendency to say something, just like I did about the courage to do something wrong. And there was a couple of employees of mine that stayed with me through 3 different companies that would write it down, silly little things. And they published a little book called Ashokisms. There's about 150 of them.
Oh.
I'm going to use my Ashokisms throughout these 11 lectures as some basis for triggering your either your funny bone or your thought processes. So the first is, the life of an entrepreneur is from terror to euphoria to terror to euphoria every heartbeat. One day, you get an order. The next day, you look at the bank balance. It's Friday, and you got to make payroll, and you don't have enough money in the bank to make payroll. That is the most terror-inducing moment you'll ever face. Trust me. But then more than that, talked about some of the Ashokisms, and I just picked 20 for today for you to look at. We won't go deep into them. We will use them all the way through, and some that are not on this list. So the first one is care passionately while being intellectually ruthless. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but that's a paradox. How can you be caring and be ruthless at the same time? Right? Delegate everything, but never delegate success. Also a paradox. Of course, track your mistakes, not your successes. And the reason I bring this up is throughout my business career, I used to keep a list, a handwritten list in those days. We didn't have much Word and all those things in those days. Of the 10 worst mistakes I made. There was one problem with that list. It kept changing. What does that mean? I made a mistake that was worse than the 10th worst mistake I had made. I continued to make mistakes because I was bringing in new mistakes that I made, but trying to learn from them. Don't keep track of your successes. The world will keep track of your successes. Keep a careful track of your mistakes. Be real about what you do. Sure.
Since you have like a really, really broad career on how many?
That's because I'm an old guy.
Okay. I'm sorry. How many fails have you had? I mean, in a way that you think on something, try, and you end up not continue on that. I mean, just.
I've been fortunate there.
Okay.
I've made mistakes, but I've been able to recover because I've kept my eye on that spectacularly right versus something that was wrong. I would say that the biggest mistake I made, which was about a $40 million mistake, this is back in 1993, when I bought a telephone company in Russia. It was a big mistake. Crooks. Every Russian I met was crook. I mean, I shook hands with Boris Yeltsin, and he said, you have to come to Russia to invest. And so it was in the eastern part of Russia, east of Siberia, Kamchatka Peninsula, Belarus. So I bought that company, thinking that telecom was not deregulated at the time, and here was a huge country ready to deregulate. Would have worked, but for the fact that they're crooks. So that was my number one mistake. But I recovered. The company that I had at the time, we lost 40 million, but we still exited. We went public at a value of about 400 million. So pick yourself off the floor and say, damn it, that was stupid. I'm not going to do it again. Sometimes you do, but then shame on you for the second time. But in terms of a company failing, not yet. Yes.
I would like to follow up that question.
Please.
And in a way that most of us here are researchers, right? So something that we face every day in the lab or whatever we do is fake, right? But also we need to know when to stop something.
Yes.
Because, and I think that's the way that I want to phrase the question is, how do we know what is the exact moment to stop and what is the moment to keep trying?
Okay, this is where mentors, advisors, professors come in very handy. They've had the experience, they've been through it, they've bloodied their nose, or they've been through that process. Don't be afraid to ask. People want to have. So if you're running into that same brick wall time and time again, go to a mentor, go to an advisor, go to your professor, and say, should I keep doing this? Or let's brainstorm how I can do it differently. Or go to colleagues. In the end, the guy you meet every morning in the mirror will tell you if you're doing the right thing. You will know. But get the advice, get the help. Get to people who have done similar things. Because that is a very good point you make, is that there's no point, keep banging your head against that wall if you're never going to break through it. And particularly in research. And so your advisor, hopefully you have advisors who are empathetic and willing to give you advice. If not, go find another advisor who will do that for you. Yes, Ganesh.
Yes, point here is that building a little bit of humility. It's when we are very young and very bright we feel like we know everything. And now looking at hindsight, whatever you think you know right now, when you become my age, you realize you knew practically nothing.
And
Building
it's
that
so right.
community is so
The
important.
doctor is right. And there is one Ashokism that encapsulates it in 3 words that is about to come up. But humility, staying grounded, knowing your own faults. We'll get to that. Let's gallop along. When I say the numbers 4 and 5 are about negotiating, we'll have a section in the lecture about negotiating, either negotiating an investment, negotiating an exit, negotiating a contract. But know, that negotiating is not about winning. I mean, we have politicians who want to win everything. No, negotiating is where both people, both parties walk away slightly unhappy. No one is euphoric and no one is crushed. That's the best deal, is when they're all or slightly happy or slightly unhappy. You didn't get to screw the other person. And know what your walk-away number is before you start the negotiating, because most people don't do that. Most people will go into negotiation thinking they're going to win. And then in the process of negotiating, they go way beyond whatever it is that they would have walked away from had they thought about it logically. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we are deal betrayed, communicate. We're going to talk about that. Higher trust. The price of betrayal is very expensive. What I mean by that is, when we are young, we want to hire people like us who are very smart, very bright. It's like if you want to run the 100 meters, you want Usain Bolt. You want the fastest, the strongest, the quickest, the one who can jump the furthest. But in business, hire someone you can trust. You want the fast and the strong and the quick, but the trust is fundamentally essential. That's got to be the first litmus test. And sometimes it's hard to figure out when you try to hire people. Those who get you there don't get you out of there. You can go faster. Sometimes they're slowing down. Precipitate a crisis during doldrums sometimes, just to get everybody excited. Know your numbers. Know the law. Don't say, I'm going to have a CFO do all the numbers. Don't say, I don't need to know about patents. I don't need to know about PCTs. I don't need to know about legal structures, C Corp, S Corp. Know at least enough to be dangerous, so that nobody can pull the wool over your eyes. Pay attention to details. All that means is, it's mathematically incorrect. You prove 100%, 1% in 100 areas, but it means pay attention to the details. Be strong, aggressive, but be humble. Be kick-ass and kiss-ass. It's a way of saying, be strong, be aggressive, but also be humble. This humility comes in quite often. First, my original Ashokism was lawyers are the cork in the ass of progress. But for this course, I say the university tech transfer offices are the cork in the ass of progress. They prevent technologies. And this one is the one that means don't shave Superman, means stay humble. The guy you meet in the mirror could have rung the opening bell at NASDAQ, could have been on the cover of a magazine, but he's the same guy who you met in the mirror yesterday. So stay humble, as you said, stay grounded. Don't let success go to your head. Think about what else it is that you need to improve on rather than improve. Hello, Superman. Compartmentalize. Don't let tomorrow's problems dominate your thinking. We'll talk about don't push the river, let it flow. The final act of preparing to act is to quit before and act. So that's for all of you who want to start companies. Don't paralyze yourself by waiting to get going. Get going sooner rather than later. But always do the right thing. Do not get tempted by something crooked, illegal, a little payoff here, a little bribery there, a little cooking the books there. Look what happened in Enron. They were a great company until they started cooking the books. So if it feels wrong, it is. So the thing I talked about, care passionately while being intellectually ruthless. Anybody want to take a shot at what that really is? For every entrepreneur, this is a very difficult entrepreneurs tend to be passionate people. They like to like. At least most entrepreneurs that I've met aren't, really, they're not jerks. It can be, some of them, like Travis Kalanick of Uber, was a complete jerk. But he built Uber. What it means is you got to combine the care with the process here. You got to care for your employees, you got to care for your customers, you got to care for your investors. But you've got to make decisions here based on maybe hurting an employee because for the overall good. I'll give you my own personal example. When I started my company back in 1990, that eventually went public in 95 on NASDAQ, we started with 8 people. One of them was a finance guy. Wonderful. Kind of like my brother almost. Working hard, 80 hours a week, building the company. We went from 0 to 5 million to 25 to 50 to 100 to 200. But by the time the company had gotten to 100 million, everybody in the company, except me, knew that the job had done some big work. And if we got to a point when after we went public, we paid the price by the fact that the numbers, there were problems. Didn't do it intentionally. I should have done something that everyone in the company knew, but I didn't, because I was caring too much, and I wasn't being intellectually ruthless enough to be able to say, okay, that person needs to be either let go or moved into someplace else, so that it doesn't become a hindrance to the success of the company. The other two are pretty, I like the last one. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own chair. That means, don't be afraid to get involved.
Set up a new table?
No new table. You want to be at the table.
Yeah.
You want to be at the table where the decisions are being made. If you go get your own table, you're going to be sucking your thumb.
That's how you break the balance.
Yeah. So, now 7-minute pitches, I guess. And I'm hoping you will structure your pitch in this fashion. But again, we have judging sheets. I would love for all of the seniors here who are not in the teams to be judges. Alex, Ravi, Doc, whoever else. Who's a?
We can have Aniket.
Aniket?
Yeah.
Well, he has his own team.
No, but he's not in the competition.
Oh, okay. Aniket, Amit, Deepak.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, and I don't think I'll spend the entire time with the before and after. Everybody's going to have access to this deck?
Yeah.
In full PowerPoint?
You can do that.
So you can go back and listen to them in full, because we're going to do a before and after of a German team that won the Rice Business Plan competition in 2022. And it's pretty darn significant, because there have only been 2 international teams ever to win the Rice Business Plan competition. It usually goes to people from the United States. There's a lot of reasons why. There's also an inbuilt bias within the judges against international teams. There's language issues. There's understanding the regulations of other countries' issues. But they blew everybody away. But I'm going to show you a little bit of how they started when I first heard them. And by the way, this CEO is actually exceptionally gifted communicator. So we started with one version that was wouldn't have qualified them even for the first round. And then you'll see a 15-minute clip, but I won't go through the whole 15. We'll just run through the first 3 or 4 minutes. And then you can watch it all, because we want to get on with this and let you all guys get home in time for a very late lunch. All right, so if you look at, okay, this is Alex Engelman, who's the CEO, and we'll go.
We are Lidotech, and we build a laser system that cuts microchips more efficiently than it has ever been done before. Our laser system is literally cutting edge. The current problem in cutting microchips is that up to 10% of them are damaged in the cutting process. Microchips are produced on wafers such as this one, and you can fit hundreds of thousands of chips on such a wafer. If up to 10% of them are damaged during the cutting process, one of the last steps before the chips are put into the digital products, that is a big problem. For a company with 10 billion euros in revenues, this is a problem of 200 million euros. If this company switched to our technology, we could save these 200 million euros because our technology does not destroy a single chip. On top of that, our technology cuts thinner than any other technology, so you can stack more chips closer to each other on these wafers. This adds an additional 60 million euros in productivity. So to summarize, we can save 260 million euros in costs, or increase the gross margin by 2.5 percentage points. The reason for such a high waste at the moment is that the current technologies have reached their physical limitations. And our technology solves a lot of problems. There are no cracks, there are no heating damages, and no particles that fall back on the surface. And you don't need to be an engineer to see that the pictures on the right look way better than the pictures on the left. And the reason for that is that we use lasers in combination with liquids to cool and rinse the material while we cut the microchips. We have filed patents on our technology, and we will continue to do so on a continuous basis. With the sale of machines and the sale of liquids, this is what our business model is based on. The first machine will be sold in 2023, break-even will be reached in 2024, and by 2025, we will sell 10 machines. Each machine will be sold for 1.5 million euros, and then for each machine that has been sold, we will sell the liquids that are needed to run the machine on a yearly recurring basis for 200,000 euros. So after 7.5 years, we will have made the same amount of revenues with the sale of liquids as we've done with a one-time sale of the machine. The market for machines to cut microchips, the so-called wafer dicing market, will grow to 12 billion euros by 2030. Europe and the US make up 7 billion of this. And if we take 10% as our serviceable obtainable market, which is ambitious but possible, that will give us a market of 700 million euros. We already have traction to get there. We have raised 1.2 million euros in 2019. We've built the first lab prototype with that, with which we can now work on client jobs. And we've done so and got our first revenues this year. And in the meantime, we've also won a few competitions. The next steps are, on the one hand, to increase the efficiency of our technology, hence to make it even faster than it already is. Then to build the first beta machine that will be tested in a client lab, and to sell that machine in 2023. And to achieve our goals, we're looking for seed financing of 3 million euros in May 2022, which will be used to build the beta machine and to fuel our growth in terms of new employees, sales, and marketing. The team behind LiDAR-Tech is a team of 4 founders that are all fully committed to this company. I'm Alex, and I'm the CEO, and have 5 years of work experience in the financial industry. Alexander Karnitz is our Chief Innovation Officer, and he's responsible for R&D and sales. Jan is our CTO, responsible for technology, software, and IT. And Yannis is our COO, responsible for operations and fluidics. Together, our 3 engineers have over 20 years of experience in laser processing in liquids. And this is one of our biggest advantages. We are LiDAR-Tech, and our laser technology is literally cutting edge. We are LiDAR-Tech, and we build a laser system that cuts microchips more efficiently than it has ever been done before. Our laser system is literally cutting edge.
Change it on the speaker.
The current problem in cutting microchips is that up to 10% of them are damaged in the cutting process. Microchips are produced on wafers.
Should I stop it? Because they're all distracted.
There's a little plus and minus on this.
Can I get back to the start of this? Like from the start. This is a technology that cuts semiconductor wafers with lasers and liquids. Sounds something that's really not existing in the world today. You either use laser, mostly they use diamond saws. Diamond tip saws, 40-year-old technology. Okay. Are we good? Okay, let's start.
And we built a laser system that cuts microchips more efficiently than it has ever been done before. Our laser system is literally cutting edge. The current problem in cutting microchips is that up to 10% of them are damaged in the cutting process. Microchips are produced on wafers such as this one, and you can fit hundreds of thousands of chips on such a wafer. If up to 10% of them are damaged during the cutting process, one of the last steps before the chips are put into finished products, that is a big problem. For a company with 10 billion euros in revenue, this is a problem of 200 billion euros. If this company switched to our technology, we could save these 200 billion euros because our technology does not destroy a single chip. On top of that, our technology cuts thinner than any other technology, so you can stack more chips closer to each other on these wafers. This adds an additional 60 million euros in productivity. So to summarize, we can save 260 million euros in costs, or increase the gross margin by 2.5 percentage points. The reason for such a high waste level is that the current technologies have reached their physical limitations. And our technology solves a lot of problems. There are no cracks, there are no
Anyway, it's kind of in the same sort of style. Now let's go to what they did. This is the finals of the Rice Business Plan Conference.
But microchips are produced on pizza-sized plates called wafers, such as this one. And on one of these plates, you can fit up to 300,000 microchips. It takes a 12-week-long process with dozens of complicated and costly process steps, such as lithography and etching, to produce these. And one of the last steps before the chips can be used in Ford F-150s or your smartphones is the cutting process. The problem? Up to 10% of chips are currently damaged in that cutting process. The result? Chips worth $30 billion are damaged every year.
And the problem is that microchips have evolved and became better and better over time, so that we have the beautiful things around us. But cutting technologies have not. The most used cutting technology still today is 40 years old, and it's a saw. And the damage this saw does to wood, it is exactly the same damage it does to a semiconductor wafer. And even more modern technologies could not compete with a saw. A laser, for example, induces so much heat so that it does affect them thermally and leads to burr formation and cracking, which leads to a yield loss in the end. But no worries. We at LighterTech have the solution. If you compare the cuts with the old technology with our technology, you just see that we have far better cuts. So the surface is clean, there are no cracks, and the edges are super sharp. So our cuts are just more precise. The innovation behind it is that we combine the best of two worlds, liquids and lasers. So imagine you have a wafer and the liquid is flowing over it, while at the same time the laser cuts out the microchips. With this patent-pending technology, we are able to reduce the damage rate of chips to virtually zero. We have smaller cuts that generate a higher output. It is suitable for any chip size and any material, and today we already reach the same speeds as the conventional technologies, but with the potential of being 5 times faster tomorrow. You might ask yourself, why did nobody else do this? Adding a liquid to a laser process? Well, because it's a highly complex process. First, you need to adequately control the flow of the liquid exactly where it is needed to evacuate debris and cool the material properly. Second, it is a circular system, so you have to recycle the liquids to achieve a higher sustainability. And third, you exactly need to match the laser pulses with the liquid flow in order to safely cut without damages. So the combination of all of the three parameters is highly complex and forms the core of our IP. To protect our IP, we have filed 2 patents, and also worldwide, and are planning to do so. And the first and 4 more are in preparation. The first one is crucial. It is on the process chamber, which guides the liquid flow exactly to the place where it is needed. The second one is a process patent that detects irregularities during this complex cutting procedure. And the liquids are protected through trade secrets, just as Coca-Cola. Speaking of liquids, here you can see our innovative process in action. The laser ignites a little shiny plasma at the surface, which you can see, and it cuts at the width quarter of a human hair. At the same time, the liquid cools the material properly and washes away any debris so that it does not negatively interfere with the process. With this super precise technology, we are going to build a laser machine that replaces current machines without any change in the process. So it is a machine 6 times 6 times 6 feet, so as tall as I am and one's around me, and it just seamlessly integrates into the production lines of semiconductor fabs. Training is minimal, the uptime is low, it has the same footprint. To rephrase Steve Jobs, it just works. And that it works because we are headquartered in the Silicon Valley of Germany. It is full of highly qualified manufacturing partners and supply chain deliverers. So with them, we are able to build the machine and modules to scale faster. With this, we can sell our machines worldwide with the best quality. With this foundation, we are ready to disrupt the wafer dicing market. There, we face 2 big entrenched incumbents, Disco and Ecotech, and they mainly sell diamond saws. And also, the other technologies like laser cutting and plasma dicing are sold, but we will see why they could not compete with the diamond saw and why we can. It was truly a great moment when a customer confirmed us that the cutting quality they have seen from us is the best quality there is. And only quality that is matched by the plasma dicing. However, our technology is able to cut any material seamlessly due to the use of ultra-short laser pulses. And we have a very low downtime as we do not need additional process steps before or after the wafer cutting. This justifies our price premium over the cost of a diamond saw, and it is still significantly lower than the cost of a plasma dicing system. So with that, I will hand over to Business Alex to elaborate and quantify the statements in a business case example.
This business case example is based on client data. They have a 6-inch wafer, which is just slightly smaller than the wafer I've just shown. And with their current cutting technology, the diamond saw, they have a 10% damage rate, so they get out 52,000 chips that they can sell from this wafer. Reducing the damage rate to 0 with the Lidotech technology means they get all 58,000 chips on that wafer without a damage, so they can sell all of these 58,000. And if you also take into account that we can cut thinner than the competitors, as Alex just alluded to, we can get even more chips on the wafer because you can stack them closer to each other on this wafer. So overall, for this client, we can increase the number of chips on the wafer by 23%. And that has financial benefits. And I would like to show you that on a company with a $10 billion revenue example. Reducing their damage rate from 10 to 0 means they will save $200 million in material costs every year. It also means they get out 10% more chips because they're not damaged, so a potential increase in revenues by $1 billion. The smaller cutting width means you can stack chips closer to each other, so you can get 10% more chips on the wafer, which also means an additional 1 billion in potential revenues. So switching to our technology, such a client could increase their sales by 20% and their gross margin by 10%. And for us, such a client, which is about the size of German chip maker Infineon, or just slightly smaller than Texas Instruments, for example, we could sell 200 machines to over a span of 10 years, 20 each year. And the interesting part of our business model, we can also sell the liquids and the service on an annually recurring basis. And that makes 500 million over 10 years for us. So in a time span of 10 years, our revenues with such a company is $700 million, and the net client savings after the costs for all our products are $1.3 billion over 10 years. The market for wafer dicing machines per year, so the market for machines to cut microchips, is $1.5 billion large. The installed number of machines is about 10 times larger. So we're just speaking about new machines every year. And you can see all the production plants around the world of the top 10 companies here on the map, with 3 clusters in the US, in Europe, and in Asia. And these 10 companies make up 75% of our market to sell machines. Their market, the semiconductor market, is about a $1 trillion market. And they are heavily investing in new production plants. Just 5 weeks ago, Intel announced 2 new production plants in Magdeburg, which is just a 4-hour drive from our headquarters. And not just that, they have space for 6 additional plants right there. So the market is growing with a 6% annual growth rate and expected to become a $1 trillion market by 2030. And if our clients are in a growing market, then we are in a growing market. And our vision is to become the global market leader for wafer dicing machines. We're laser focused on that, pun intended, but our technology can do more than just cutting microchips. Once we're established in that market, we want to branch out. We can cut smartphone displays, stents in the medical industry, lenses for the automotive industry, or even wings for airplanes. And all these different fields together make a total addressable market of $35 billion. We started 2.5 years ago with a 1.4 million government grant. With that money, we built a lab prototype. With that prototype, we started cutting chips as a service for clients. We convinced Infineon with our quality to start a cooperation with us. And we were part of the Intel Accelerator program, which helped us incredibly, not the least because it enabled us to be featured with Intel in the most read daily economic newspaper in Germany, which gave us a lot of traction. And that traction we want to use to become a global player step by step. And the first step is to sell the first machine, which we target for 2023. From then on, we will grow to 4 machines to 10 machines by 2025, where we will reach break even. And from 2026 onwards, we want to be in the big production facilities of the large semiconductor companies. And you can see that the revenues are split in 2 colors. The green are the machine sales, and the orange are the annually recurring revenues from liquids and services that are needed to run our machine. In order to achieve these goals, we're looking for a $3.5 million seed round. We will use that for sales and marketing. We will build a clean room. We will also invest in patents. But predominantly, this is for product development to build and sell these first machines. Selling the first machine is the key milestone of the seed round, and that will put us on a great basis for further growth and internationalization to the US in 2024 and to Asia in 2026. And you might think this is not possible with just a seed round, and you're right. We're looking for 2 more rounds in 2024, a Series A of 8 million, and in 2026, a Series B of 15 million. And from 2028 onwards, we expect good exit potentials through IPO, merger, or buyout. And we've seen comparable transactions starting the trade at 4x revenues up to 100x revenue multiples when Intel bought Habana Labs. Last but not least, I would like to present you our whole founding team. We're all full-time committed to LiDAR-Tech. You've already met Tech Alex and myself. I have a background in finance, pursuing a PhD in entrepreneurship. I worked for Goldman and PIMCO for 5 years, and I'm the CEO of the company. Alex has a background in physics. He is our lead innovator with regards to the laser process and business development. He's pursuing a PhD in mechanical engineering. He's our Chief Innovation Officer. Jan, on the bottom left, our CTO, is engineering the machine and also the software. And Yannis, with a PhD in mechanical engineering, takes care of the production and all the communication with the suppliers that we need to build the machine. Together, we have diverse know-how in science, engineering, and finance, with over 24 years of research experience in laser processing in liquids, with more than 40 publications and more than 2 million research grants raised so far. Please join us in our journey to disrupting the wafer dicing industry and to reducing the global chip shortage. We're Lightrotech. We're Lightrotech, and we're literally cutting edge.
Yep. How about Brad right here?
But you saw the complete difference in approach. A little more conversational, engaging, storytelling. Doesn't matter how great your technology is, your research is, if you can't tell potential customer, potential employee, or a potential investor the story in a compelling fashion, you don't have a company. So that's the trick you all have to learn. It's not a trick, it's actually a skill. And so that's what we're going to be trying to do. And you've got to do it in a way that's logical. You saw how they set up the problem. Here's a chip, but with a little humor. Not those kind of chips, but these kind of chips. And then they went into, okay, so what's the current problem? Well, they cut the diamond tip saws, which cause 10% of the chips to be wasted. And then they go on to, here's the size of the problem, here's our potential solution, here's our technology, here's the IP that protects it, here's our go-to-market strategy, here's our manufacturing strategy, here's how we build it, here's what we're going to sell it for, here's how much money we're going to make, when we sell it for this amount, and then here's the investment we need to get us to this point. Right? That's the way you tell the story. And then once you've made the investment, dear investor, here's the kind of return you expect to see, that we would expect you to see. Now, they're always late, and an investor is always saying, it'll cost more and it'll take longer, but at least you've thought about it. Any questions? Any thoughts? Just I want you all to watch and listen to both, before and after, please. And then try to apply some of those concepts to what you all do. I think you all have made a great start, but there's a lot of room for improvement. A lot of room for convincing an investor group, convincing a customer that you have what it takes to solve their pain point or their problem, or that you recognize. Okay? So, what I'd like you to do, please, is try to tackle your own personal entrepreneurial statement, 1 or 2 pages, double-spaced for old guy's eyes, and just sort of say, okay, how does your background as a PhD student help you to create something, that's going to be useful to the world? Here's, some, you're all deep tech guys, mostly. So you've got to answer some of these questions. Does your PhD enable you specialized knowledge that creates unique market opportunities? Think about that. Your deep domain expertise. Intellectual rigor. Do you have the intellectual rigor, the scientific approach, and access to networks to build companies? And then here's some reading materials that I think that'll come in handy. The first one is Scott Shane's book, first chapter. In fact, I have a printout of it here. I'll give it to, but you can get it online. It's really great about university spin-outs and how technologies from universities can be used, and the problems you face getting university spin-outs. The second one is a book by Bill Aulet, who ran the MIT Entrepreneur Center for many years and wrote a book on MIT MIT's results in entrepreneurship. They are the gold standard amongst universities and what they have been able to accomplish. And the rest is there if you have time. There's some podcasts you could listen to from lab to startup. It's very handy. So if you have time, and it may not be tomorrow, it may be next week, it may be the week after. Every week, every lesson we have, I will give you some reading suggestions. You don't have to, but it'll be very helpful for you as you embark on your journey to build your own company. It's more than just listening to me for 11 lectures. These are some leap behinds. And one of the reasons why some of my slides are wordy, where I'm really violating my own principle of saying not so many words, is because this is a leap behind for you all. So there's got to be more information. You may not remember every word I said, but you can at least read it on the slides. And some of the future lectures will also be the slides will be fairly wordy just for that purpose. Any questions, any thoughts before we break?